Greg Migliore, Editor-in-Chief of Autoblog. Most of the time you see us, we're tracking the latest sports cars or off-roading in the desert. Now we're giving you an inside look at the automotive industry and the people who make it happen. Each episode, we sit down with industry movers and shakers. We pour a couple beers and let the stories fly. How did they get into the biz? What makes them tick? We discuss it all in a casual happy hour setting. Grab a seat and have yourself a drink. This is Autoblog Off The Clock. Welcome inside Griffin Claw. I'm Greg Migliore. Joining me today is Senior Editor for All Things Green, John Beltz Snyder. How's it going?
It's going well. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And Road Test Editor, Reese Counts.
How's it going?
It's going well. We've got some good beers in front of us. I think we should probably drink them. This is Mr. Blue Sky. 4.5%. So it's a easy drinker, if you will. This is actually my go-to for like golfing, things like that, where I'm going to be in the sun. Going to be outside, good cookout beer. Coriander is mixed in there, I think.
Yeah.
I like it. I dig it.
Yeah, it's good. It's sort of got that bubblegummy thing going on that some wheat beers have. Really light, crisp, easy to drink, but a little bit of softness on the tongue. And yeah, the coriander makes me think of Goza a little bit.
It's got the grapefruit in there too, which is one of my favorite things to put in beer. So I like it in IPAs. I like it in this wheat. It's good.
So speaking of beers, press trips.
Yeah.
When you guys were on a press trip, have you ever had that moment, that aha moment, where you're like, this is cool. I've made some good decisions and I've made it, for lack of a better way to put it. That you guys ever had that moment? Maybe you're still waiting for it.
My first big press trip was in 2009, and it was in Southern California, some golf resort, Pelican Hill, I think it's called. And we're driving the Lexus ISC and the Lexus HS, their old hybrid sedan.
Yeah,
neither of which are with us any longer.
Is that what HS stands for, is hybrid sedan?
Oh, I never thought of it that way. Maybe.
Man.
But I was kind of like, what am I doing here? I was like one of the youngest guys on the trip. People trust me enough to fly me out here and drive these cars and give my expert opinion on them. This is cool. I like doing this. I've always wanted to write, and I've always loved cars. And so it was kind of on that trip where I was like, this is the real thing.
I remember I was like 26, 27 years old, and I was at it wasn't even the launch. It was like the preview reveal of the first generation of the Volt. And I was in one of the top boardrooms of the Rensen where General Motors is based. And Bob Lutz was doing the briefing. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, this guy's literally 3 times as old as I am. He was wearing this gray, straight out of Mad Men suit. He looked like 80-year-old Don Draper. Just totally commanded the room. All these other people from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal are asking him all these questions. And I asked a question. I don't know what it was, but I think it was something about the car. And at that moment, that was sort of my what am I doing in this room? But it's pretty wild that I'm here. And yeah, I'm asking Bob Lutz to explain something. That was pretty cool.
Which he probably didn't take too kindly to.
It was okay. It was like a general, question, but.
Yeah, Lutz is a intimidating guy.
That foghorn voice, he's been almost in charge of 5 car companies. I mean,
flies a fighter jet.
Ran GM for years, and I kind of defined I think the past 15, 20 years of what GM is, even after he left.
He was so when Rick Wagner was the CEO, he was product. And he was just wide responsibilities. It was you could do whatever you want within reason as far as product. And I think that helped the resurgence a little bit too, but.
For sure.
I mean, tough guy. What about you, Reese?
Well, like John, my first press trip took place in Southern California, though I was living there at the time. I was interning at Edmunds about 4 years ago, coming up on 4 years now. We were doing a big video and photo shoot at Willow Springs, Streets of Willow.
Nice course.
Yeah. And I got to drive a press car up there. I stayed in a hotel overnight. Everybody was there. But yeah, the end of the day, I remember sitting at on the track at Streets in a '66 Corvette, while they were doing
Nice.
photo shoot around me. And like, I was like, oh, like the stuff I'm doing today is like going to be published online. And like, that was nothing I'd really written or been in yet, had been like published on the site. And it was cool. It was the stuff like you see in like on the web or on YouTube or in the magazines. Like that was like when it really hit me.
Yeah, it's interesting when you kind of like, you're in those moments where you're literally drinking it in, thinking, oh, hey, I kind of made it here.
Drinking it in.
Drinking it in, yeah, cheers, guys. What about like, I don't know, what in your past made you want to like do this? You know, is there like something in there that, you know, or did you just randomly come to it?
Well, a little bit of both. I always wanted to be a writer, like I said. My mom was a big car person. Her dad, John Beltz, my namesake, was originally chief engineer at Oldsmobile and then general manager.
That's awesome.
Yeah, up until 72 when he died. So he was sort of behind the 442 and the Tornado. And so I grew up with all these stories from my mom about, you know, her growing up in these cars. And then my dad was a mechanical engineer. And so he was always, you know, bringing me out to the garage to do projects, making electric motors and stuff. And then, yeah, I just loved driving. So, you know, my first car was an S10 Blazer that was a hand-me-down from my sister. And then I got into a Jeep and started off-roading a whole bunch. And then after that, I got an 04 WRX. And that made me really fall in love with driving. Yeah, a little while after that, I was out of college, went to grad school, didn't like it, was maybe going to go into teaching, did some tutoring, sort of felt like that wasn't for me. And then I got a call from Seth Mearsma, Come to Winding Road. And yeah, that's basically my automotive history.
I want to hear how you got into this, Reese. But before we do, I think it's time to change up the beers. Did like this one. Here's the icing on the cake. On the can, it has a quote from Elmore Leonard, who's sort of known as the Dickens of Detroit. Really great writer.
There are cities that get by on their good looks. Detroit has to work for a living. That's pretty good.
I like this one, guys. Prost. This is a Kolsch style, Koln's Classic Ale. Specially requested by John and imported here from Colorado from Chris McGraw.
Yeah, I haven't had this one, but Chris knows I like Kolsch's. I told him maybe I'd bring in there's a certain kind of glass for Kolsch's. It's called a Stange, which is German for stick, and it's just like sort of a straight pipe of a glass. But yeah, I'm excited to try it. I haven't tried it. And Prost is German for cheers, so Prost.
Prost.
Prost. This makes me think of like covering the Frankfurt Motor Show.
Oh yeah, anything German like this.
One of my favorite shows to cover, actually. Like you were saying, John, like those like stick like glasses.
This or the beer garden at the New York show, which is always fun. Porsche's been hosting it the past few years, but pretzels and German beer. Has there been a German press trip that you guys have not had pretzels on?
No.
I feel like
I don't think so.
Stuff them in your pockets
It's usually
as soon as you get off the
breakfast,
airplane.
And then usually cut in half with butter and then put back together.
Yeah, that cheesy butter, whatever they use.
Yes, that's amazing.
I don't know what it is, but it's delicious.
So what's your backstory, Reese? How'd you get into all of this?
My family, mostly my grandfather and my dad. My grandpa, he ran moonshine back in the 50s in Arkansas.
My kind of guy.
Yeah. Was a hot rodder.
That's an awesome backstory.
Yeah, traditional, before he passed, you meet him and he was kind of this quiet, reserved guy, but you talk to him about cars and he ran moonshine. He was a hot rodder and got into it and track racing and stuff like that. And then moved to St. Louis and bought a 54 Corvette and was driving American cars for a while. And then during the 70s, he got into Volvos and then later got into Mercedes and BMW. And I actually own his last Mercedes, a 99 C43 AMG. Without him, I probably wouldn't be doing this, but I could say the same about my dad, who owned Corvettes. He's a Corvette guy. And Has owned 17 of them.
Wow,
And
that's pretty awesome.
He had an 86 when I was born, traded that for an 88, traded that eventually for a 94, which is what I learned to drive in. Learning to drive stick in a big V8 like that was great because it had enough torque that you really didn't need to feather the accelerator. But yeah, both like that's like what got me interested in cars from like the time I was little. I mean, I remember probably not the safest thing, but sitting on my dad's lap and like him letting me steer the car.
Nice.
Yeah, riding around in the passenger seat. I mean, things you did like 20 years ago that were like nobody thought about. But it's funny, like John, my first car was a S10 Blazer. I had that for.
I don't think I knew that.
Did you not?
I don't know.
Yeah, it was a two-door S10 Blazer.
Oh yeah, we've talked about that.
Yeah.
Because mine was a 4-door.
I sometimes I still miss it. I have thought about finding one for like a winter car.
Those are coming back too. It's like they're hitting that phase of their vintage now. And
I did the hot rodder thing. Like I lowered it, put some like old Corvette rally wheels with the cop center caps on it.
that's a good look. I like that.
Yeah, it was cool. It was clean. I dug it. I drove that until I bought my GTI, which I had until even when I started Autoblog, and then I bought the Mercedes. And I had two cars, and I was like, I'm driving a lot of press cars, so I sold the GTI and I still have the Mercedes. But yeah, that's kind of like, I don't know. I was always around cars. I was never not going to be interested in cars. I went to school for journalism because I wanted to write about cars and got into it and haven't looked back. But how'd you get into this, Greg?
It's been more of like sort of like this almost osmosis, absorbing it. My parents took my brother and I just like classic car shows in the summer all the time. The family history, nobody actually like really directly worked at a car company for very long anyway. We've got a couple of like kind of like random vignettes, if you will. So my dad worked at Multimatic back in like, 60s, 70s, somewhere in there, which is kind of random. I still have a pen that's like says Multimatic on it.
Cool.
And he also worked in it was Burroughs at the time, but now it's where Rivian is actually making their North American, is it design center or base or something?
In Plymouth?
Out in Plymouth,
yeah. I think that's our headquarters.
Headquarters, okay. So stuff like that. And then to go really far back, in the 1930s, my grandmother worked for a guy by the name of, I think his name was Paul Garrett, and he was the first public relations guy basically for a major company, and this was at General Motors. And she was essentially like his, secretary, chief of staff, like all the different things back then. And she would tell like me and the other grandkids these crazy stories about GM in the 30s and like what it was like before the war and like their ideas for cars. And, she was young, she'd get to go to New York just randomly, and so yeah, just stuff like that. And it's, again, for me, it was more just like, I like cars. I always like to write, kind of put it together, and it's pretty good. And then all this other stuff was like lurking around the periphery. So it was kind of like, not inevitable, but it just seemed like the logical route. There was no part of me that was like, oh, hey, there's this other cool thing, I don't know, cooking or, that made me think there were other viable careers for me. So even though I kind of stumbled into this, I also have no idea what else I'd be doing. You know?
Right.
Yeah, especially at this point when we've been doing it so long.
So of everything you guys have owned, what's been your favorite?
I did neglect one car on my list of cars I owned. I owned it very briefly, but it was, I had an old 442. A 67
That's amazing.
Convertible.
Oh,
And
wow. I didn't even know that about you. That's so cool.
I didn't have it for too long because it was a pain in the ass, but the little time that I had it, my sister and I would drive it around. We inherited it from my mom. It was hers for a while. She bought it, pretty late in life. Just as, a tribute to her father. And so cool. I had that and drove it around, loved it, and then I didn't really have a place to put it, and then I didn't have a place to, work on it. I didn't have the know-how to sort of keep up on it, so I had too much other stuff going on in my life. So we sold it, and I regret selling every car I've ever sold.
It's funny.
And that's a big one. But yeah.
So I don't have that long of a list of favorite cars, to be honest. I think when you go back to like, maybe, I don't know if this is coolest, but I had an 87 Reliant. That was my first car, K-car. The only reason we gave it up, because it was cheap, it was paid for, it was a hand-me-down. The steering didn't work. And to fix the steering, it was like way more expensive than the value of the car. So yeah, that was it for the 87 Reliant. But it's funny, every now and then I'll see one of those at like an auction in like perfect condition for like $2,000 or something.
They made a lot of K cars.
They made a lot of them, and I'll get slightly nostalgic. But yeah, how about you, Reese?
So it sounds like try to say like that the current car I own is my favorite, but my AMG. I mean, it's cool. Like
yeah, Reese owns an AMG. That's
yes,
pretty awesome.
I love it. It belonged to my grandfather, so it's got the family history, but it's this like compact sedan that's got a 4.3 liter V8. It's got blue and black leather interior. It sounds awesome. I think it looks cool. I mean, I don't know. Like, it's the current car I own is the favorite car I've ever owned. So
I want it.
Yeah. With that, we have had a few, so we're going to leave the driving to you. Reese, thanks for being with us. John, thanks as well. This is fun.
It is.
Yeah.
It's great.
Let's go, guys.